Now, with the uncertainty and confusion surrounding the hung parliament, a lot of focus has obviously been on what the reaction in the market has been like. And joining us now to discuss, I suppose, what the market reactions has been, both in the broader market and also the smaller cap space. We're joined now by Sebastian Evans, a fund manager at NAOS Asset Management. He's coming to us now from our Sydney City studio in the CBD. Sebastian, thanks very much for your time today. I suppose just to kick off with, what impact do you think that the hung parliament is and will have on buying trends in the market?
I think just overall it creates a lot more uncertainty in the market, where we've seen, well, we've gone through a time of sort of greater uncertainty with the resource tax and changes in NBN and subsequently the telecommunications space, and even in the green space with the carbon tax and sort of the lack of follow through there. I think what you'll find is just a lot, people won't be putting as much money into the market until, I think, first of all, a government's put in place. It'll be a minority government. And I think even then you'll see a lot of back and forth, you know, with these independents and with the Greens in the Senate now. There'll be a lot of to and fro, and you may even see people go back to the polls in 12 months. So I think a lot of investors will be taking a long, hard look at what the ramifications are and trying to steer clear away or keep away from different industries where there's a lot of regulations involved.
And from a market's perspective, do you think the key is going to be getting a quick resolution?
Well, I think that is part of the key, and I think you've seen a lot of commentary on that. But I think at the end of the day, it may be quick, but at the end of the day, if the views aren't aligned, I mean, you can only push a person so far. So I think at the end of the day, you really need to have a government that has majority control. So I think that's my personal view, is that I think you'll see there is a reasonable chance that you'll see people going back to the polls in 12 months.
And in terms, I suppose, of the small cap sector, the uncertainty is going to have just as big influence on it as well, I would have thought.
Yeah, no, most definitely. I think you've seen the small cap space underperform until sort of the last month or so compared to its, the larger index. And I think now, with even more uncertainty, people will be even more afraid or more uncertain to put money into smaller caps or even micro caps. But, from my own perspective, we try to look at stocks that aren't affected by sort of the macro changes and the regulatory changes around them, and it becomes more of a stock-specific issue. So at the end of the day, if you can pick the stock and pick, an undervalued play, you should do well over a reasonable time frame.
Just before we move to some of the stocks that you like, could you talk us through maybe some of the stocks or sectors that are most likely to be affected by this confusion over who will govern?
Well, I think the three that come to mind be the green space. Are we going to get a carbon tax? Is it going to be pushed through a little bit quicker than maybe a few people thought? And obviously, to each of these arguments, there's the other argument if the coalition gets in. I think, what happens to the NBN and subsequently to the telecommunications space. And then finally, you've seen the resource tax. If the coalition gets in, the tax could be scrapped altogether, even though it's already been watered down. So there'll be the three industries that people will probably be trying to stay away from. But I think in the resource space, even though a lot's been priced in already, so I think there's a very small chance of it getting worse based on the resource tax.
Now, you mentioned before that the Small Ordinaries Index has made a bit of a comeback in the past month. Taking, I suppose, a bit of a broader perspective, how would you describe the general health of it at the moment?
Well, I suppose I've got a biased point of view, but I think in many of these stocks, I think the outlook has been quite good. I mean, we've tended to steer clear from the cyclical stocks and retailers, and especially those that are discretionary, such as furniture and white goods. But I think, overall, the outlook and the results that have come through so far have been relatively pleasing. A lot of these companies have very strong balance sheets, they've got good management teams, and they've come through with the goods. I think the issue is just investors simply aren't putting as much money into small caps as they were subsequently to what happened 2 to 3 years ago. And I think you're seeing that lag again. The Small Ordinaries always lags the larger index, and I think when eventually it does come up, it's a bit like a slingshot effect. It'll really catch up, and it'll put a lot of people offside, and they'll be sort of scrambling to gain some exposure to the smaller stocks.
And looking through some of the numbers, your small companies fund has clearly outperformed the broader market, especially through the GFC. So what is your investment strategy?
It's a little different to everyone else's. We try to stick to more of a concentrated portfolio and steer away from more of an index-hugging style. we tend to focus on companies that are very independent of the macro environment around them. It's very stock specific. They have their own strategy and they go about their own way over a number of years, achieving their goals. They're not affected by things such as a carbon tax or regulations around NBN or the resources tax. I think at the end of the day, if you find companies with a competitive advantage, a good set of assets, and a very solid management team, which is key in the small space, over time you will do well. And even though you may struggle from time to time, as long as that management team sets out to do what they've said they would do, then you'll make that up and a whole lot more.
So what is it about the small cap sector in particular that you like?
I think the amount of opportunity, and I think how many stocks you can find that are undervalued for a number of reasons. I think they're artificially undervalued, because of liquidity. They may not trade very much, or a perception that used to be true but might not be true anymore, or just the fact that they're a small company. Something capped at 30 million as opposed to 3 billion. People say, well, it shouldn't be on the same multiple, which I completely agree with. But at the end of the day, it shouldn't be trading on 3 or 4 times. So I think even if it goes to 6 times or 7 times, you can make a good capital gain in a relatively short period of time with a low risk tolerance.
Okay, the crunch question then, Sebastian. What are some of the small cap stocks that you like at the moment?
Some of the ones that I think are coming up that start to look interesting, we've started looking at ServiceStream, which are based in the telecommunication space of all places. But I think the key for them is they can be a beneficiary off both sides, whether it is the NBN or they do build lots of towers for mobile networks, or in the case of the coalition, if the coalition goes ahead and gets voted in, then they'll be building all these towers for this wireless internet that Tony Abbott's referring to. But the key for them is they've also gone into solar panels as well. And the fact remains that a lot of these, the infrastructure in the telecommunications space away from Telstra, and if you're looking at Optus and Vodafone, these networks are old and they need to be updated if they're going to cope with the amount of capacity that's coming on. And ServiceStream is a huge beneficiary of this. So, the stock's, it's got a new management team in place. It's had a number of write-downs, but the slate's clean. I think this is the time you'd want to own the stock.
So would you tell, I suppose, people watching out there at the moment that the small cap space, the Small Ordinaries Index, is a place to find value?
Yeah, most definitely. I think as long as you do your work and you have a high level of conviction, I'd be more than happy to put money in the small cap space. I think that's what we try to do. We pick a few number of stocks. We do more in-depth sort of research, and that's why we hold a fewer number of stocks, because we have a much higher conviction level than holding 50 or 60 stocks. We'll only hold 20. But I think that's the place you need to be, because if you get these right over 2 to 3 years, you'll do very well.
All right, Sebastian, look, thanks very much for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Not at all, thank you.